rolling through the streets, blurring the line between exhaustion and irritation. On the corner of 8th and Main, beside a battered old bench and a bus stop sign that had seen better decades, sat Charlie Grant. At 84, Charlie had the sturdy build of someone who'd once been a force to reckon with, but time had shrunk him a bit. His shoulders hunched now beneath the weight of years and memories. He wore a faded army cap, the insignia almost invisible beneath the dust, and his wrinkled hands gripped the armrests of his weathered wheelchair. Most days, people drifted by Charlie like he was part of the scenery, just another forgotten soul in a city full of them. He didn't mind much. There was a kind of peace in being invisible, a relief in the quiet. But today, as the rumble of distant traffic mingled with the city's shouts and laughter, something in the air signaled trouble. 3 teens swaggered down the sidewalk, their sneakers slapping the concrete with the bravado of youth. The tallest wore a neon green hoodie with the hood yanked up, a smirk already plastered across his face. His buddies, a wiry kid with headphones and a heavier boy trailing with a bag of chips, flanked him like loyal soldiers, but their eyes were searching, hungry for some mischief to break the monotony. They spotted Charlie. Instantly, the dynamic changed. Their voices lowered, became sharper. The leader strolled up to the bus stop and eyed Charlie's cap, his lips curling. "Well, well, what do we have here? General Grandpa holding down the fort," he sneered, tipping his chin in a mock salute. Charlie met his gaze calmly, refusing to flinch. "Just waiting for my ride, son." The wiry kid snickered. "Bet this dude fought in like the dinosaur wars. How many Nazis did you actually scare, Grandpa?" The laughter was loud, echoing down the sidewalk, catching the attention of a few passers-by who paused, then hurried on, unwilling to get involved. Charlie's jaw tightened. He'd faced down mortars and machine gun fire in Europe and Vietnam, but this kind of disrespect still stung in a way that bullets never did. Before Charlie could reply, the heavier teen moved behind him. He nudged the wheelchair, tilting it just enough that Charlie's hands shot out, gripping the rail so he wouldn't tip over. "Careful, Pops. Wouldn't want you to break a hip," the boy said, barely able to contain his laughter. The scene might have ended there, a small, cruel humiliation to be forgotten by the next bus. But just as the laughter peaked, a figure in a battered blue jacket stepped forward from the edge of the bus stop. He'd been sweeping up candy wrappers and soda cans, his broom scratching at the ground with slow, deliberate strokes. He looked older than the city itself, gray hair wild under a faded baseball cap, clothes patched but clean, face half hidden beneath a day's worth of stubble. He leaned on his broom and fixed the teens with a gaze that held no fear. "Enough to give you the freedom to be that ignorant," he said quietly. The leader's head snapped around. "What was that, janitor?" The old man didn't move, didn't blink. "I said men like him earned you the right to act a fool. Maybe don't waste it." The boys hesitated, but the tension snapped as quickly as it had built. The wiry kid stepped forward and shoved the old man, Ellis Monroe, back against the bench. Ellis stumbled, but kept his footing, his hand still on the broom. The teens turned away, laughing again, but there was a new note to their laughter. Something uneasy, as if they sensed they'd gone a step too far but couldn't back down in front of each other. Charlie watched the whole thing, his blue eyes sharp beneath bushy gray brows. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, quietly, he glanced at Ellis. "You all right, son?" Ellis straightened, brushing dust from his jacket. "Takes more than a shove to put me out, Charlie." "You got a mouth on you." "Always did," Charlie said, a wry smile ghosting across his face. A city bus rumbled by without stopping, kicking up a swirl of grit. The sidewalk seemed emptier somehow, as the teens moved off, but Charlie could still hear their laughter in the distance. "You see the way they looked at you?" Charlie said after a moment, voice low. "Like you weren't even real." Ellis shrugged, returning to his sweeping. "Doesn't matter what they see. I know who I am." Charlie studied him, eyes narrowed. "Not everyone does, Ellis. Not these days." For a moment the silence was heavy, charged with things neither of them said out loud. About growing old, about being dismissed, about the cost of service and the price of peace. Suddenly, the teens reappeared a few yards away, looking back, voices raised. "Hey, Grandpa, where's your medal? Bet it's plastic," the leader jeered. Ellis glanced at Charlie, something steely in his gaze. "Ignore them." Charlie looked away, his hands still tight on the rails of his chair. But inside, an old anger flared, one he hadn't felt in decades. It wasn't for himself, but for men like Ellis, for every veteran who came home to a world that moved on without them, that forgot the price of their freedom. He wanted to say something, anything, but his throat was tight. Across the street, a woman carrying groceries paused, watching the scene with worry. A city cop in a parked cruiser glanced up, then back down at his phone, uninterested. Ellis swept a bit more forcefully, the broom bristles snapping against the pavement. The teens finally turned and melted into the crowd, their laughter fading. Charlie let out a long breath. "World's changed, Ellis." Ellis stopped sweeping and looked at the sky. "Not as much as you think, Charlie. Still takes the same things to be decent. Just most folks forget what those things are." Charlie nodded, looking down at his lap, at the hands that had once been strong enough to carry wounded men from battlefields, now trembling slightly. A low rumble of thunder rolled in the distance, and the air grew heavier still. The bus stop returned to its uneasy stillness, the city pressing in around two old men, one in a wheelchair, one with a broom, standing guard at the edge of a world that seemed to have forgotten them. But as Charlie glanced at Ellis, and Ellis nodded back, something unspoken passed between them. A recognition, a bond, and maybe, just maybe, the promise that respect, though battered and bruised, wasn't quite gone yet. A restless hush fell over the bus stop, heavy with the aftertaste of humiliation and old resentments. The city's noises, horns, distant sirens, shoes slapping concrete, seemed to fade for a moment, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Charlie and Ellis settled back into uneasy silence. Charlie's hands still trembled slightly on his wheelchair's rails, and Ellis resumed sweeping, every stroke slow and deliberate, as if to sweep away not just trash, but the sting of disrespect. Then, just as the tension seemed to ease, a new sound split the quiet, a deep, guttural screech of tires against asphalt. Down the block, a black, unmarked van whipped around the corner and shot toward the bus stop, its headlights flashing in the afternoon glare. The city around them seemed to slow to a crawl. Ellis stiffened, his hand pausing mid-sweep. Charlie's eyes narrowed, an old alertness flickering in his gaze. The van came to a sudden, calculated halt, its engine rumbling ominously. In one fluid motion, the passenger door swung open. Two men stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in identical dark suits and mirrored sunglasses, each with a thin wire snaking from their ears down into their collars. They scanned the area with quick, practiced movements, their gazes cutting through the crowd like lasers. Conversation on the sidewalk dried up as people instinctively shrank back, unsure whether to run, record, or simply stare. The taller agent moved first, striding toward the bus stop with an authority that brooked no interference. He positioned himself between Ellis and the sidewalk, planting his feet as if guarding a high-value target. The second agent did the same, facing the other direction, making a protective barrier around Ellis and Charlie. The teens, now lurking at the corner with their reinforcements, phones out and ready, froze, their bravado evaporating. This wasn't the reaction they expected. Their joke had drawn something far bigger than they'd bargained for. Just then, from the other side of the van, a woman in military dress uniform appeared. Her boots clicked with measured precision. She moved with the self-assurance of someone who had spent a lifetime giving and receiving orders. As she approached, she snapped a crisp salute in Ellis's direction. "Colonel Monroe, transport secured. We're ready when you are, sir." A murmur rippled through the small crowd that had begun to gather. Phones rose, fingers tapped, faces behind camera screens hungry for the viral shot. The teens who had started the trouble now stood stock still, their eyes darting between the agents and their friends, all confidence draining from their faces. Ellis didn't say a word. He simply straightened up, the broom now more staff than tool, and glanced at Charlie. Charlie, for his part, looked neither surprised nor afraid. There was a quiet respect in his eyes, a recognition of an old comrade's true rank and value. One of the teens, perhaps the bravest or maybe just the most foolish, sputtered, "Wait, Colonel? Like for real? Is this a prank or something?" The question was more a plea than a taunt now, thin with uncertainty. The woman ignored him, her focus entirely on Ellis. "Orders from the secretary, sir. They said you'd know what it means." Her voice was low but carried the weight of authority. Ellis nodded, then reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and produced a battered leather wallet. He flipped it open with a practiced flick, showing an ID card with the words "United States Army Retired" and a silver insignia gleaming at the corner. The agents saluted in unison, their posture straightening even further. Charlie let out a soft chuckle, shaking his head. "You still don't miss a beat, do you?" The agent nearest to Charlie turned, eyes still hidden behind mirrored lenses. "Mr. Grant, it's good to see you again. We're here for Colonel Monroe, but we're also here for you." Charlie blinked, caught off guard for the first time that day. "For me?" "Yes, sir," the woman replied, her tone gentle. "Your service records flagged you for security. We don't leave our people unprotected." A quiet awe fell over the bystanders. A few began whispering, trying to put the pieces together. Two old men at a bus stop, one a decorated veteran, the other a janitor who suddenly commanded the respect of secretive government agents. Even the bus driver, who had just turned the corner, slowed down, wide-eyed behind the wheel. One of the teens lowered his phone, the bravado gone from his face. "Dude, is this for real?" The heavier teen who had tried to tip Charlie's wheelchair took a nervous step back. "Man, let's get out of here." But the leader, sensing the eyes of the crowd on him, tried to regain control. "They're just faking it, man. Just old guys in costumes." He didn't get to finish. The second agent stepped forward, voice calm but icy. "Son, maybe you ought to rethink your attitude. You never know who you're talking to these days." Another teen, clearly shaken, muttered, "Let's bounce now." Just then, the first drops of rain began to fall, spattering the sidewalk, sending people ducking for cover under awnings and bus shelters. The agents didn't move. Neither did Ellis. He stood in the growing drizzle, looking every inch the leader he once was, and still was, under the surface. The woman stepped closer to Ellis, lowering her voice but not her gaze. "We can take you now, sir, or you can wait until the next bus. It's your call." Ellis looked at Charlie. There was a silent question in the old medic's eyes, a question about loyalty, about the ties that bind men together long after the uniforms are packed away. Charlie grinned, tapping his cap. "You know I'd follow you anywhere, Ellis." Ellis smiled, the first real smile of the day, and shook his head. I think we'll wait, Major. Some things you don't rush, like teaching young men how to act right. The Major nodded, stepping back. The agents relaxed, but not entirely. The teens, shamed and shaken, drifted away, muttering to themselves. Their earlier cruelty deflated into uncertainty. From somewhere down the street, a siren wailed, echoing off the damp pavement. The rain thickened, painting the city in silver streaks. The tension had broken, but something deeper had taken its place. A realization that the men everyone overlooked were, in fact, men everyone should look up to. As the crowd dispersed, Charlie and Ellis remained, their bond made stronger by the day's events and the secrets only they shared. Around them, the city went on, busy, indifferent, but for a moment, just a little more respectful. And as the rain continued to fall, the unspoken message hung in the air. Sometimes heroes don't wear capes, and sometimes the people we walk past every day are the ones who shaped the world we live in. The rain's steady patter on the bus stop roof made the world feel smaller, almost intimate, as though the city itself was holding its breath out of respect. The tension from moments ago softened, replaced by a quiet no one wanted to break. Ellis Monroe leaned his broom against the bench, his hands finally still, while Charlie Grant let out a slow, careful sigh, the old man's shoulders dropping a little with relief. The agents, their job momentarily done, took a few steps back to give the two men space, though their alert eyes never wandered far. Ellis broke the silence first, voice low and unhurried. You ever think about how it all went by so fast, Charlie? He asked, almost as if they were alone in some distant, quieter place. Charlie let out a faint laugh. Every damn day, Ellis. Sometimes I still dream about it, you know? The heat, the noise, the way everything smelled like smoke and fear. That single line, the way Charlie said it, seemed to open a hidden door between them. Their present-day forms faded for a moment, replaced by memories sharper than any pain or insult the city could throw their way. Suddenly, the bus stop wasn't just a battered bench in a gray city. It was a shadowy, steamy clearing deep in the Vietnamese jungle, 40 years in the past. Charlie was young again, his frame lean and wiry, uniform clinging to sweat-soaked skin, face streaked with mud and desperation. Gunfire cracked in the distance. The whirring chop of helicopter blades beat a panicked rhythm above the trees. Charlie was hurt. He could still feel the sharp, white-hot pain of shrapnel in his leg, blood pooling fast in his boot. The world had become a dizzying swirl of green and red, the smell of gunpowder so thick he could taste it on his tongue. Ellis was there too, fiercely determined, eyes bright and alert even as chaos raged. He dropped to his knees beside Charlie, hands steady, voice calm. "You're not dying here, Grant," he barked, yanking a field dressing from his pack, cinching it tight around the wound. Charlie could barely keep his eyes open. "Don't leave me." Ellis scooped Charlie up, strong arms under his shoulders, and began dragging him through mud and gunfire. All around them, the jungle burned and men screamed, but Ellis moved with purpose, dodging falling branches, ducking behind trees, every step a miracle of willpower and defiance. "You think you're heavy, Grant? My grandma carried sacks of flour heavier than you," Ellis teased through gritted teeth. Charlie managed a shaky laugh, even as blood loss clouded his vision. "Yeah, but she didn't talk as much." Ellis's voice snapped back to the present, breaking the memory's grip. "You always were stubborn, you know that?" Charlie's smile lingered, soft and far away. "Only because you kept dragging me out of the fire, brother. More than once." The agents exchanged a quick glance. discreet, respectful, but said nothing. Even the few onlookers who still lingered at the edge of the bus stop seemed to sense something important was happening, something bigger than an old argument or a viral video. The city's noise faded into the background, and for a while, the only thing that mattered was the history between these two men. Ellis dusted off his hands and picked up his broom again, though this time his sweeping was more absent-minded than purposeful. "Didn't expect to be pulled out of retirement like this," he said, glancing sideways at Charlie. Charlie's reply came quick, edged with the humor that had always seen him through. "Neither did I expect my old medic to save me from punks in hoodies." For a moment, they both laughed, a deep, genuine laugh that cut through the dreariness of the day. It wasn't lost on the soldiers standing nearby, who smiled quietly to themselves. A few passers-by, seeing the laughter, relaxed, their curiosity shifting to warmth. But then the laughter faded, and with it came the heaviness of everything unsaid. Charlie looked out at the wet street, his expression serious. "You ever wonder if it was all worth it, Ellis? All those nights, all those fights. Sometimes it feels like the world's forgotten what it cost." Ellis was silent for a moment, letting the rain fill the space between them. Finally, he spoke. "It's not about whether they remember, Charlie. It's about whether we do. We keep the story alive, not just for ourselves, but for every kid who thinks service is just a word." Charlie nodded, moved by something he couldn't quite put into words. Just then, the leader of the suited agents, a tall, stoic man with a scar under one eye, stepped forward. "Colonel Monroe, Mr. Grant. Your safety is our priority, but if you'd rather wait for the bus, we'll remain close." Ellis gave a small, grateful nod. "You're good men, but we're not running, not today." The agent returned the nod and melted back into the background, giving the two old friends their privacy. The city's energy returned, the bustle growing as umbrellas bloomed and cars sloshed through puddles. But at the center of it all, Charlie and Ellis remained in their bubble of memory. Ellis sat down on the bench, setting the broom beside him. The two men stared out at the rain together, saying little, letting the silence do the talking. Finally, Charlie broke the quiet. "You remember the old base in Saigon? The card games, the music on the radio?" Ellis's eyes lit up, and he grinned. "Yeah, and you never let anyone win, even when you were busted up." Charlie shook his head, smiling. "I guess I never learned how to lose, not even now." Ellis's tone softened. "That's not true. You just never learned how to quit." A moment passed, heavy with all the things they'd seen and survived together. The pain, the laughter, the loss, and the stubborn will to keep moving forward, even when the world was cruel or indifferent. "Here's to stubbornness, then," Charlie said quietly, extending his hand. Ellis took it, shaking with a firmness that belied his years. "Here's to never backing down." The rain eased a little, and the city seemed just a touch brighter, as if honoring two old soldiers whose brotherhood had never faded. No matter how many decades had passed or how many people chose to look the other way. As they sat together, the soldiers maintaining their silent watch and the city's rush returning, a sense of peace settled between Charlie and Ellis. They had made it through battlefields, hospitals, and now the indifferent stares of the modern world. Nothing could break what had been forged in fire and sacrifice, and for the first time in a long while, as the bus approached in the distance, the two men felt truly seen, not just by each other, but by a world that, even if only for a moment, paused to remember. Morning arrived on the city's streets with a hush, the kind of gentle gray that made everything softer, even the sharp angles of cracked pavement and cold bus benches. A light rain lingered, painting the world in a sheen that blurred the lines between past and present. At the battered bus stop, Charlie and Ellis sat side by side, two old soldiers finding calm in the steady rhythm of water against steel and glass. There was peace here, a quiet broken only by the city's distant heartbeat. Horns, the shuffling feet of early commuters, the low thrum of engines waiting to stir the day awake. The world felt smaller in the rain, as if all the noise and trouble of yesterday had washed away, at least for a little while. Ellis, still clutching his old broom, shrugged off his coat and shook out the battered army poncho he kept stashed inside. "Here," he said simply, draping it gently over Charlie's shoulders. "Can't have you catching pneumonia before noon." Charlie smiled, warmth lighting his blue eyes. "Still looking out for me after all these years, huh?" His hands found the poncho's edges, remembering 100 times Ellis had thrown one over him in the jungle, in foxholes, beside muddy rivers that seemed to run with their own sorrow. Ellis sat down, the weight of years sinking into his bones. He gazed out through the rain, watching the city blur. "Habit, I guess. Something to keep my hands busy. Never could stand sitting still too long." Charlie let out a small laugh. "Some things don't change. You always needed a job to do, even when there was nothing left but waiting." A moment of silence stretched between them. It wasn't awkward, just full. A silence built on trust, the comfort of sharing space with someone who understood. It was Ellis who finally spoke, his voice almost lost in the rain. "Funny thing is, most folks see me out here and think I'm homeless. Crazy, huh? They never ask. They just look right through me and keep moving." Charlie watched him closely. "Why do you keep doing it? The sweeping, the picking up after everyone else?" Ellis twirled the broom in his hands, thinking. "Keeps me grounded. Reminds me I'm still part of something. I spent so many years trying to put things back together. People, camps, supply chains, you name it. Guess I just never learned how to let go. The city's messy, but if I can clear one patch, just one little corner, it feels like I'm doing my part." Charlie nodded, letting those words sink in. "You could have taken any job after you got out, you know. Didn't have to end up here." A bittersweet smile tugged at Ellis's lips. "I tried. I really did. I had the office gig, the tie, the nice shoes. It felt fake, like I was pretending to be someone I wasn't. Out here, at least, nobody expects you to be more than you are." The rain intensified, drumming softly on the metal bus shelter. Charlie's breath fogged the air. He looked at his friend and asked the question that had always haunted him. "And you never regretted not having more?" Ellis shook his head. "More what, Charlie? Money, status. I saw what those things did to some of the guys we served with. How it ate them up, made them forget where they came from. I got a roof, a warm meal now and then, and some days, a smile from a stranger. That's enough for me." Charlie let out a long, thoughtful sigh. "Most people wouldn't understand. They think you need to own something to matter." Ellis grinned, showing the cracks and lines of a life well lived. "I own every step I take. Every day I get to choose what I do, who I help. That's freedom, Charlie. More than any paycheck could ever buy." The rain slowed, leaving only a fine mist swirling around their feet. A city worker in a reflective vest walked past, giving Ellis a polite nod before moving on. A woman with 2 children hustled by, pausing just long enough to smile at the 2 old men. In that fleeting moment, there was no judgment, just quiet acknowledgement. Charlie studied the city around him. He saw it differently now. not just as a place that had changed beyond recognition, but as a living thing, still full of small kindnesses and silent witnesses. "It's strange," he said softly, "how you can feel invisible and more alive at the same time." Ellis leaned back, eyes half closed. "You know what I've learned, sitting here all these mornings? People are in a hurry to forget, to move on. But every once in a while, someone stops. They see you. And for a second, that's enough." Charlie reached over, his hand resting on Ellis's shoulder. "We earned that, at least. The right to be seen." A pigeon landed nearby, picking at crumbs. For a while, the men watched its determined little march through puddles, neither needing to speak. "Do you miss it?" Charlie finally asked. "The uniform? The mission?" Ellis considered. "Some days. Not the fighting, but the feeling that what you did mattered. Now I get that from little things. Helping someone find their bus, picking up a wrapper, giving my poncho to an old friend. Maybe it's not grand, but it's real." Charlie's voice turned wistful. "People would be shocked to know what you did, that you held men together in the worst hells this world has seen." Ellis shrugged. "Let 'em be shocked. I'd rather they just say good morning, maybe pick up their own trash once in a while. That's enough glory for me." Charlie chuckled, the sound bright against the gray. "And people think you're homeless?" Ellis grinned, wide and unbothered. "I've never been freer, Charlie. I get to be who I am, every single day." The bus stop grew busy again. Office workers in crisp suits mingled with teenagers in hoodies, none of them looking twice at the two men sharing the bench. But Charlie and Ellis didn't mind. For the first time in a long time, they felt the world slow down just enough for them to breathe. As the rain eased and a faint shaft of sunlight broke through the clouds, Ellis reached into his pocket and pulled out an old, battered photo. Two young men in muddy fatigues, arms slung over each other's shoulders, grinning at the camera with the cockiness of youth. He handed it to Charlie. Charlie's fingers traced the image a lifetime ago. "We made it, didn't we?" Ellis nodded. "Still here, brother. Still here." With that, the city moved on. But for Ellis and Charlie, the morning lingered, precious and unhurried, a quiet testament to the bonds that last beyond war, beyond hardship, beyond the world's forgetfulness. And as another bus rumbled in the distance, its headlights slicing through the mist, the two friends knew they would face whatever came next together, just as they always had. The quiet of the morning didn't last long. In a city where peace is always on borrowed time, the spell between Ellis and Charlie was soon broken. It began with the distant, mocking sound of laughter, the kind that cuts through calm and draws uneasy looks from bystanders. Charlie heard it first, his old instincts making his spine stiffen. Ellis, too, looked up from sweeping, his hands gripping the broom a little tighter. Down the block, the same trio of teenagers appeared, swaggering with a new kind of confidence. This time they weren't alone. Two more teens trailed behind them, one skinny, tall, with a phone out and already filming, the other broad-shouldered, carrying a half-finished soda and an attitude to match. As they moved closer, a few pedestrians slowed their pace, sensing trouble, but most simply skirted the edge, unwilling to get involved. "Hey, look who it is!" the leader called, grinning as if seeing old friends instead of his earlier targets. "It's Grandpa and the janitor, back for round 2. The others snickered, emboldened by their numbers and the watchful eye of a camera phone, the device acting like a shield and a weapon all at once. The group circled the bus stop, voices rising, egging each other on. The teen with the phone made a show of zooming in on Charlie's wheelchair, and then on Ellis, sweeping. "Hey, YouTube wants part 2 of Grandpa versus Janitor," he crowed, laughter pealing through the air. The others echoed him, their cruelty louder now, fueled by the prospect of going viral. Charlie tried to ignore them, his eyes focused on a patch of cracked sidewalk. But the tension in his jaw, the white-knuckle grip on his chair, betrayed his anger. Ellis, for his part, moved calmly, still sweeping, but his body language had shifted. He stood straighter, his gaze hard and unwavering, the casual air gone. One of the new boys, the broad-shouldered one, snatched a plastic bottle from his friend and hurled it at Charlie's feet, the bottle bouncing off the concrete with a dull, ugly thud. "Oops! Didn't see you there, old man," he said, his tone mock-apologetic, eyes shining with mean amusement. The laughter grew louder. The camera phone panned between faces, capturing every sneer and taunt. "Come on, say something, Grandpa," the tall teen prodded. "Let's hear some war stories." Ellis stepped forward, planting the broom like a staff. For a moment, time seemed to slow. Raindrops hung in the air. The world narrowed to the circle of teens and the two old friends on the bench. With quiet authority, Ellis spoke. "You think this is a joke? You're about to learn the cost of disrespect." His voice didn't rise, but it carried a deep, grounded certainty that cut through the noise. The teens exchanged glances, some nervous, others defiant. The phone kept rolling. The leader sneered. "What are you going to do? Sweep us to death? Chill out, man. We're just having fun." Ellis locked eyes with him, refusing to look away. Fun at someone else's expense isn't fun. It's cowardice. The tension was electric now, crackling in the air. A few passers-by had gathered at a safe distance, their phones out, but no one stepped in. The bus stop felt like a stage, the city a silent audience waiting for the next act. Suddenly, the broad-shouldered boy shoved Ellis's broom aside. "Why do you even care? It's just trash, just like you." The insult hung in the air, sharper than broken glass. Charlie, unable to stay silent, pushed his chair forward, voice quivering but strong. "That's enough. You think you're tough because you got a camera and a crowd? Try standing for something when nobody's watching. That's real courage." The tall teen laughed, but the sound was brittle. "What? You gonna give us a lecture? We're just trying to make a video, get some views. You should be flattered." Ellis shook his head. "You don't even know what you're putting out into the world. Once you record something, it's there forever. The things you mock, service, sacrifice, dignity, are the things that hold this country together." One of the new teens, the one with the phone, hesitated, lowering his arm for a moment. The others noticed, their bravado faltering just slightly, but the leader pressed on, refusing to lose face. "Let's get this over with. Show the internet how these geezers freak out," he said, nodding to the broad-shouldered boy. The boy stepped closer to Charlie, feigning a punch, but stopping just short. The crowd tensed, a few gasps escaping. Ellis's hand shot out, not aggressively, but firmly, intercepting the boy's wrist. In that instant, the soldiers, who had been quietly watching from a distance, moved in. The two suited men stepped out of the shadows, their presence undeniable. They positioned themselves between the teens and Ellis, the unspoken warning clear. But Ellis raised his other hand, signaling them to hold back. "Let them speak. I want them to hear me." The agents hesitated but obeyed, standing down yet maintaining a watchful stance. Ellis, releasing the boy's wrist, reached slowly into his coat. Every eye followed his movement. He pulled out a small, weathered box and opened it. Inside, nestled against velvet, lay a worn silver star and a folded letter, the paper yellowed with age. He held them up, his voice unwavering. "This isn't about medals. It's about what you grow into after you fight for peace. About who you choose to be when the war's over." The teens went silent, unsure how to respond. Even the camera wavered, the lens lowering as the boy's hand began to shake. For a heartbeat, the city itself seemed to pause. Raindrops slid down the faces of the bystanders. The wind rustled discarded wrappers along the curb. But within the circle, all eyes were on Ellis. He closed the box, slipping it back into his coat. Disrespect is cheap, service is costly. You'll figure out the difference someday. I hope it's sooner rather than later. A strange quiet settled over the group. The leader, his earlier confidence crumbling, forced a laugh. Whatever, man. Let's get out of here. But one of the teens, the youngest, with haunted eyes, didn't move. He looked at Ellis, the weight of the moment pressing down. The rest of the group, confused and restless, started to drift away. The camera clicked off, but the damage, and maybe the lesson, had already landed. Charlie watched, pride and sadness mingling in his gaze. Ellis stepped back, broom in hand, but taller now, the years of quiet dignity shining brighter than any metal. And as the bus rolled up in the distance, brakes hissing in the morning air, the city itself seemed to acknowledge what had just happened. For the first time that day, respect settled over the bus stop. Not loud or dramatic, but real and earned. And the story was far from over. For a moment, the tension at the bus stop felt like a taut wire, ready to snap, with the city's usual indifference replaced by the charged anticipation of a crowd sensing a story unfold. The teens, newly emboldened but visibly shaken by Ellis's quiet authority and the unexpected revelation of his mettle, shifted their feet, uncertain. The boy with the phone hesitated, unsure if he should keep recording, his earlier bravado drained away by the gravity of Ellis's words. Charlie, still wrapped in Ellis's poncho, sat perfectly still, his presence calm but his eyes sharp, watching every move. Ellis stood tall at the center, broom in hand, as if it were a flag he'd chosen to plant in the ground, not a weapon, but a symbol. It was then that the soldiers stepped in. With silent precision, the two suited men in dark jackets moved forward, their military bearing unmistakable. They didn't bark orders or threaten, but their presence alone changed the atmosphere, like the sudden arrival of order in a place ruled by chaos. The younger teens shrank back instinctively, the tension in their shoulders shifting from aggression to unease. The leader of the group, defiant to the last, tried to mask his discomfort with a smirk. "What, you got your own private army now, janitor?" His voice wavered, thin and reedy in the thick morning air. The taller soldier, the one with the scar under his eye, locked eyes with the teen. "You're lucky all you're facing right now is a lesson. Where I come from, disrespect carries real consequences." The words hung in the air, cutting deeper than any threat could have. The agents formed a loose wall between Ellis and the group, but Ellis raised a hand, his voice strong and calm. "Let them speak. I want them to hear me." The soldiers paused, deferring to him with a respect that spoke volumes. The teens looked from Ellis to the men in suits, and for the first time, their posturing fell away. Even the phone wavered and lowered, recording forgotten. Ellis looked each of them in the eye, his voice carrying clear and steady above the hush that had fallen. "You see medals and uniforms, and you think they're what make a person worth listening to. But they don't. What matters is what you do when nobody's watching. When you've got no audience, no phone to record you, just your choices." He reached into his coat, pulling out the battered box again and opening it for all to see. The silver star glimmered dully in the gray morning light, and the folded letter trembled slightly in his weathered hands. "This isn't about medals. It's about what you grow into after you fight for peace. Ellis said, his tone never rising, only growing steadier. The war ends, but the fight for your own soul never does. You think I sweep this street for a paycheck? I do it because I know what it means to protect something, no matter how small. One of the teens, the one who'd thrown the bottle, looked away. Another, the youngest, stared at the metal with a kind of hungry awe, as if trying to imagine a world where he could earn such respect. Ellis continued, "You have a choice every day. You can be the kind of person who tears down or the kind who builds up. It's easy to mock, to film, to laugh at someone you think is weaker. It's harder to stand for something when nobody's watching." The city, often so loud and unforgiving, seemed to hush itself for a heartbeat. Raindrops traced silent rivers down the glass of the bus shelter, and the people watching, those with phones, those with bags and hurried feet, stood still, waiting to see what would happen next. The leader of the teens opened his mouth, ready to fire back with some new taunt, but nothing came. He closed it again, his face coloring with uncertainty. The silence pressed in, awkward but honest. The soldier with the scar moved to Ellis's side, speaking softly. "Colonel Monroe, are you sure?" Ellis nodded. "I want them to listen, not just hear me. That's how change starts." He looked back at the teens, meeting their eyes one by one. "You want to go viral? Go out and do something that matters. Help a stranger. Stand up for someone who can't stand up for themselves. That's what'll last. That's what'll make people remember your name." There was a murmur in the small crowd, a few quiet nods, a shifting of feet. One of the younger teens bit his lip, fidgeting with his phone, suddenly unsure if he wanted to share the video after all. Ellis closed the box and tucked it away, the movement final and deliberate. "You don't have to respect me, but you should respect yourself enough to do better than this." A ripple of unease went through the group of teens. The broad-shouldered one stepped back, his posture shrinking, the earlier swagger replaced by something closer to shame. The leader shook his head, not out of defiance but because he no longer knew what else to do. The crowd, having witnessed the exchange, began to break up. Some people tucked away their phones. Others whispered quietly as they moved on with their day, the lesson lingering in the air like the fading rain. But the moment wasn't lost. One of the agents glanced at Ellis with quiet admiration, as if to say, "You did more here today than any of us could." Charlie, watching the teens slink away, gave Ellis a small, knowing smile. "Never could resist giving a good speech, could you?" Charlie teased, his tone gentle. Ellis chuckled, some of the tension slipping from his shoulders. "Old habits. Besides, some things you have to say out loud, or the world forgets." Charlie nodded, his eyes distant for a moment, as he remembered his own lessons, the moments when someone else's words had pulled him back from the brink. One of the teens lingered behind, his phone forgotten at his side. He looked up at Ellis, his voice small and uncertain. "Why do you still care, after everything?" Ellis looked at him, seeing not just the boy, but the world he would inherit. "Because I know what it's like to be lost. I know what it's like to be found, too. Someone showed me the way once. All I'm doing is paying it forward." The teen nodded, his face thoughtful, and then turned to catch up with his friends. The group shuffled away, quieter than when they'd arrived. Charlie watched them go, a slow grin spreading across his face. "Maybe there's hope for them yet." Ellis nodded, resuming his sweeping, but the gesture was lighter now, less burdened. The rain had stopped, and a weak sun struggled through the clouds, casting a pale light over the city. And in that light, for a fleeting moment, the scars and pain of the past faded, replaced by the quiet pride of men who had given all they had and still had something left to teach. The soldiers melted back into the city, invisible once more. The crowd dispersed. But the lesson, the real one, remained, a silent promise that dignity, service, and respect would outlast the cruelty of the careless. And as Ellis and Charlie shared a look, one of brotherhood and hard-won peace, they knew their work was not yet done. For a few long moments after the confrontation, the air at the bus stop remained thick, as if everyone there had been holding their breath for too long. The crowd that had started to gather, hungry for a fight or a viral moment, now hung back, reluctant to break the fragile silence that had settled. The city felt different in this pause, gentler, almost vulnerable. Ellis returned the silver star and the letter to his jacket, his movements slow and careful, as if handling sacred objects. The teens, who only minutes ago had been so eager to perform for the camera, now seemed much younger. Their faces, once sharp with bravado, were clouded with something that looked a lot like shame, confusion, or maybe even sorrow. The leader shuffled his feet, his mouth opening and closing without a word coming out. The broad-shouldered boy stared down at his shoes, no longer looking for the next opportunity to taunt. The kid with the camera phone fidgeted, his thumb brushing the cracked screen, uncertain if he should delete what he'd just filmed. But it was the youngest among them, a slender boy, maybe 15, with freckles dusted across his nose and a restless energy in his eyes, who finally broke the silence. His voice, when it came, was little more than a whisper, but it carried easily in the morning hush. "My grandpa was in Iraq," he said, his eyes fixed not on Ellis or Charlie, but somewhere far away. "I never met him. He died before I was born. All I know is stories. I only hear stuff." At first, no one moved. The admission landed like a stone in a still pond, sending ripples through the group. The other teens looked at him, surprised by the sudden vulnerability. Charlie glanced at Ellis, who nodded softly, understanding more than anyone else what it meant to carry someone else's legacy, especially when it was too heavy to understand, but too important to ignore. Ellis stepped forward, the city's usual indifference replaced by genuine attention. He looked at the boy with a kindness that stripped away years and bravado. There was no judgment in his eyes, only empathy. "Then you carry that legacy now," he said quietly, voice steady and true. "Every action you take is a reflection of his sacrifice. You don't get to choose the past, but you do get to choose who you become because of it." The boy's eyes shone, uncertainty warring with something deeper, a hunger for connection, maybe even forgiveness. He swallowed hard, his face working through a storm of emotions. "I never knew what it meant. I just thought, I don't know, that none of it mattered." Ellis crouched down so he was at the boy's level. "It matters. It always matters. Your grandpa's service isn't a story for someone else. It's a part of you, even if you never met. Sometimes the weight of that can be scary. It's easier to laugh, to pretend it doesn't count, but that doesn't make it go away." Behind them, Charlie watched with quiet pride. He knew this moment. He'd lived it before, years ago, in a hospital tent under a jungle sky, when a terrified young medic named Ellis Monroe thought he wasn't strong enough to carry the burden of being needed. It was always the same story, passed from generation to generation. The uncertainty, the fear, and the final, fragile acceptance that you are enough, just as you are. The teen shook his head, his voice breaking. "I always thought my dad was mad at me because I didn't ask about Grandpa. He never talks about it." Ellis put a steady hand on the boy's shoulder. "Some pain is too hard to speak. Sometimes silence is how people survive. But you don't have to be silent, son. You can ask, you can listen, and you can honor him by being better, by doing good, starting right now. A tense silence fell as the other teens watched, their own tough facades crumbling as they witnessed one of their own open up in front of everyone. The leader, still struggling to reclaim control, mumbled, "Man, we didn't know. We were just messing around." Ellis looked at him, not with anger, but with weary compassion. Most of us don't know what we're carrying until someone makes us look. The world can be cruel, but it can also be kind, if you let it. The tall teen with the phone, voice shaky, asked, "What if you screw up? What if you already messed up too much?" Charlie answered, his voice strong despite his age. "You always get another shot, son. Regret's just a sign you can do better. The real failure is giving up." The youngest boy nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. In a sudden, surprising gesture, he pulled his phone from his pocket, stared at the recording of the incident, the cruelty, the jeering, the confrontation. With a decisive motion, he threw the phone into a nearby trash can. The plastic clattered against the metal, echoing through the street. For a heartbeat, everyone stood frozen. Then, as if a spell had broken, the rest of the teens turned away, tossing their own phones aside or shoving them deep into their pockets. Eyes averted, voices subdued. They walked off, not running, not hiding, but moving with the awkward heaviness of those who had just learned something hard about themselves. A few bystanders who'd witnessed the transformation, some with their own scars, others just there for the drama, stood a little taller. A city worker in a neon vest paused to pick up a piece of trash, nodding in respect at Ellis and Charlie before moving on. Ellis rose to his feet, brushing the rain from his jacket. He watched the teens disappear down the block, then turned to Charlie with a soft smile. "You know, I always hoped one day I'd get through to someone. Didn't think it'd be here." Charlie grinned, relief and pride mingling on his lined face. "You did more than that, Ellis. You gave them something their own parents couldn't. That's what matters." The suited agents, still quietly observing from the periphery, nodded in approval, their stance relaxed now that the storm had passed. The woman in uniform who'd earlier called Ellis Colonel stepped forward, her voice respectful. "Sir, you just taught a lesson most folks go their whole lives without learning." Ellis accepted the compliment with a nod, humility etched deep in his posture. "Just paying forward what was given to me. That's how it's supposed to work." The rain had finally stopped, sunlight peeking through the clouds, washing the city in a pale gold glow. The air felt lighter, the world changed in ways no camera would ever capture. Charlie gazed up at the sky, the promise of a new day warming his tired bones. "Guess there's still hope for the world, Ellis, as long as someone's willing to speak up." Ellis patted his friend's shoulder. "As long as we're breathing, brother. As long as we're breathing." And with that, two old veterans sat together, letting the world move on, content in the knowledge that the hardest battles aren't always fought with guns, but with honesty, compassion, and the courage to face yourself. The bus stop, once a battleground of harsh words and bruised egos, had shifted into a sanctuary of hard-won understanding. The air was clear now, rinsed clean by the passing rain and the honesty that had flowed between strangers. Ellis Monroe and Charlie Grant sat quietly, side by side, soaking in the rare warmth of sunlight peeking through broken clouds. The echo of the teens' confession and transformation still hung in the air, like the lingering notes of a hymn at the end of a Sunday service. For several minutes, time seemed to move differently, slower, more deliberate. Cars drifted by in the street, their engines muffled. The city's tempo returned to its usual pulse, but those at the bus stop felt subtly out of step with the rest of the world. It was a moment set apart, carved from the ordinary, made sacred by shared pain and small acts of grace. In the quiet, Ellis returned to his sweeping. It was a gentle, meditative movement now, not a chore, but a ritual. Each pass of the broom felt like a benediction, clearing the last traces of conflict, honoring the invisible battles fought every day by people no one noticed. Charlie adjusted the army poncho around his shoulders, watching the rhythm of his friend's work, a proud, private smile lingering on his lips. The suited agents, having stepped back to give the two men their space, lingered nearby. The tension in their bodies had melted away, replaced by respect. The woman in uniform glanced at Ellis and Charlie with the quiet reverence of a soldier for her elders, men who had once done what now she did, and who still lived by the same silent code. It was then that the low, familiar rumble of a city bus approached from down the block. The vehicle, a lumbering blue and white workhorse, splashed through a lingering puddle and hissed to a stop in front of the shelter. The doors folded open with a sigh. A young driver, face still boyish despite the uniform, stepped out and hurried over. He wore a small pin shaped like an eagle on his lapel, just subtle enough that only someone who'd served would notice. He moved with purpose, but when he reached Charlie, his brisk professionalism softened into genuine care. "Let me help you, sir," the driver said, voice respectful, not patronizing. Charlie nodded, grateful, as the driver carefully set up the bus's wheelchair lift. He maneuvered Charlie onto the platform and guided him up, checking every step with gentle precision. At the top, before re-entering the bus, the driver paused, turned to Ellis, and snapped a crisp salute. "You're the reason I joined the army, sir," he said quietly, a flush rising in his cheeks. Ellis blinked, caught off guard. For a second, the old bravado and playfulness gave way to something deeper. Pride, humility, even a touch of disbelief. He nodded solemnly. "You keep serving, son. That's all the world needs." The moment was not lost on the passengers already on the bus. Some had seen the last of the confrontation. Others had only just boarded. But word of the morning's events had traveled fast. A few older men in the back tipped their hats. A young mother whispered something to her child, who gazed in awe at the two veterans. Respect, often a rare currency in the city, moved quietly among them now. The driver turned to Ellis. "You sure you don't want to ride?" Ellis shook his head, a gentle smile on his lips. "Already where I need to be, thanks. Someone's got to keep this corner honest." The bus driver nodded with understanding, and with one last look, returned to his seat. He called out to Charlie, "You need anything, sir? You just ask. Always." Charlie grinned, the years falling away from his face for a moment. "Thank you, son, and take care of yourself." The bus doors closed. As it pulled away, the faces at the windows watched Ellis for a beat longer, some waving, some simply holding his gaze in silent acknowledgement. It was a small parade, a brief honoring of a man whose greatest medals were the lives he touched without fanfare. As the city's heartbeat returned to its steady rhythm, Ellis went back to sweeping. The woman in uniform lingered a moment longer, watching him. "You know, Colonel," she said softly, "I always wondered why you stayed in this city after all you'd seen. Why not move somewhere quiet, somewhere peaceful?" Ellis leaned on his broom, looking down the street as sunlight gleamed off wet asphalt. "Because peace isn't a place, it's a choice. And this city needs someone to remind it every day what respect really looks like. You can't teach that from a distance." The woman nodded, understanding more than words could say. She gave him one last salute, then faded into the crowd, the agents following, their mission complete for now. For a while, Ellis was alone at the stop. He watched the world flow past, kids hustling to school, office workers checking phones, a man handing $1 to someone less fortunate. He saw it all, each small act of kindness a thread in the larger fabric of the day. Charlie, from the bus window, caught Ellis's eye as the vehicle turned the corner. He raised a hand in farewell. Ellis nodded back, their friendship unspoken but as strong as any oath. Charlie's silhouette faded from view, but his presence lingered, just another veteran moving through the city, honored in ways that couldn't be measured by medals. Suddenly, a small voice piped up behind Ellis. He turned to see the youngest of the teens, the boy who'd confessed about his grandfather. He doubled back, hesitant but determined. "Thank you, sir," the boy said quietly, holding out a folded piece of paper, a note, its edges wrinkled, words written in hurried, messy script. Alongside it, a single wildflower, plucked from a city garden. Ellis took the note and read it. The words were simple. "For what you did, and for what you do now. I'll try to do better. I promise." Ellis smiled, eyes shining. He placed the flower on the bench and tucked the note into his pocket. The boy lingered, unsure, but Ellis nodded at him. "You're on the right path, son. Just keep walking." As the boy disappeared into the city's flow, Ellis looked up at the flag fluttering atop the building across the street, its colors bright against the blue. The moment felt whole, honor restored, respect earned not through force, but through humility and the willingness to stand for something when no one else would. The city moved on, the day growing brighter. But for those who had paused at the bus stop that morning, a new understanding lingered, a recognition that dignity and redemption are earned, often in the smallest of ways. And so, Ellis swept the sidewalk beneath the fluttering flag, his heart lighter than it had been in years, knowing that honor, real honor, always finds a way home. A gentle hush lingered around the bus stop, as if the city itself were pausing to listen. The sun had broken fully through the clouds now, turning raindrops on the bench into tiny diamonds, casting long shadows that stretched across the sidewalk. Morning rush had resumed, but in this small corner of the world, time moved differently. Something important had happened here, even if most people would never know the details. Ellis Monroe moved slowly, sweeping the last remnants of trash from beneath the bench. The flower and the note from the young boy remained untouched, their presence a quiet testament to change. Charlie was gone, his bus lost in the city's currents, but his spirit seemed to linger in the quiet camaraderie that now suffused the stop. As Ellis worked, his mind drifted, not to battles fought with bullets and fire, but to the quieter wars waged every day. He remembered faces, a young medic in the mud of Vietnam, a scared boy sent to clean latrines in basic training, a grieving mother at a military funeral who never learned to be proud of her son's sacrifice because the world had never explained it to her. These were the moments that truly shaped a life, he realized. Not medals, not applause, but the patient, invisible labor that kept a community strong. A little girl walked by with her father, her small hand tucked firmly in his. She glanced at Ellis, her eyes full of honest curiosity. "Daddy, is that man homeless?" she whispered, just loud enough for Ellis to hear. Her father hesitated. "No, honey, he's cleaning up. He's making things nicer for everyone." The girl studied Ellis for a moment, then gave him a bright smile before skipping off, the simple gesture filling him with warmth. For a fleeting second, he felt completely seen, not as a shadow in the city, but as someone who mattered. Ellis sat on the bench, letting the broom rest beside him. He looked down at his worn hands, at the veins that mapped his history, at the scars earned in places and moments no one else remembered. For a while he just breathed, feeling the gentle breeze on his face. A voice echoed in his memory, one of his old commanders, from long ago. You don't know a man by his medals. You know him by what he does when no one is watching. He'd heard that line 1,000 times. It had meant something different every decade, but today it rang true in a new way. Ellis thought about the teens, about the way their laughter had changed to understanding, the way even their apologies had been wordless. Just a change in the way they walked, a softer note in their voices. Sometimes that's all you could hope for. Across the street, a city sanitation truck pulled up. The driver, a burly man with tattoos on his forearms and a baseball cap pulled low, climbed down and crossed over. He nodded to Ellis, offering a thermos of coffee. "Morning, sir. You always beat me to this corner," the man said, his voice friendly. Ellis took the coffee gratefully. "Habit, I guess. Gotta keep the place honest, right?" The sanitation worker laughed. "My old man was a Marine. Used to say the same thing. Said some folks clean with a mop, others with a uniform. All part of the same job." Ellis smiled, raising the thermos in a small salute. He was right. Doesn't matter what you're holding. Broom, rifle, pen. It's about what you protect. The city worker lingered for a moment, as if unwilling to let go of the rare comfort of real conversation. Finally, he shook Ellis's hand, then got back in his truck and rumbled away. Alone again, Ellis watched the world go by. Young people hurrying to class, a couple arguing gently in Spanish, an old woman pausing to rest her feet. All of them, he realized, owed a piece of their day to people like him. Men and women who swept, who drove buses, who picked up trash, who kept the gears of society turning with their quiet diligence. A group of high school kids passed, talking and laughing, their voices echoing off the buildings. One of them, a girl with pink streaks in her hair, paused and looked back at Ellis. She nodded, a gesture of recognition. "Thanks for what you do," she said. And her friends, a little awkward but earnest, echoed her sentiment before continuing on their way. Ellis was touched, not because it was a grand gesture, but because it was real. Respect, he thought, was not owed, but earned, one small act at a time. He leaned back on the bench, looking up at the flag fluttering above the post office across the street. The colors were vibrant in the sunlight, alive with promise and memory. He remembered men who'd saluted that flag on foreign soil, who'd dreamed of coming home to a country that remembered them. Some had made it, others hadn't. But all of them, in one way or another, had helped keep the country clean, not just from dirt or danger, but from the invisible rot of forgetting where we come from. A city bus passed, the driver giving a small salute as he went by. Ellis returned it, smiling quietly. A young woman stopped by the bench, setting down a cup of coffee and a sandwich. "For you," she said. "Thank you for keeping this place safe for my daughter." She didn't wait for an answer, but the gratitude in her voice echoed long after she'd gone. As the morning wore on, the bus stop filled and emptied again and again. Each time someone left a small sign of appreciation, a folded note, a flower, even a simple nod. Ellis tucked these mementos into his jacket, carrying them as proudly as any medal. And above it all, a quiet voice seemed to narrate the morning. You walk past people every day without knowing their stories. Some are sweeping sidewalks, but they once walked battlefields. Some ride the bus, but they once marched for freedom. You think you know what matters, but dignity is built in silence, and legacy isn't found in applause. The broom isn't just for trash. It's for protecting dignity in a careless world. The words rang true for everyone who paused to notice, but especially for Ellis. He knew, better than most, that real service isn't always about sacrifice on a battlefield. Sometimes, it's the daily choice to care, to protect, to clean what others leave behind. Not for glory, but for the simple, stubborn belief that every person deserves respect. As the sun climbed higher and the city began to sweat with the heat of a new day, Ellis stood, stretching the old ache from his bones. He swept the last of the morning's debris into a neat pile, his movements patient and precise. He glanced down at the bench, at the flower and the note, and then back up at the world. In that moment, he understood. He didn't keep the city clean for a paycheck, or even for recognition. He did it for the people, for the girl holding her father's hand, for the teens trying to find their way, for the men and women who'd fought and fallen before him, and maybe, just maybe, for himself, for the man he'd become, and for the country he still believed in. With the broom in his hand and hope in his heart, Ellis resumed his quiet watch. The world moved on around him, but he remained, steady, proud, and free. The sun had completed its arc above the city, and a warm golden light washed over the bus stop, transforming its once battered features into something almost beautiful. The rain was long gone, leaving behind the gentle scent of wet pavement and hope. Ellis Monroe remained at his post, his broom a silent sentinel, his eyes reflecting the journey of an entire morning. A morning that had changed more than just the sidewalk's cleanliness. It was late afternoon now, and the city was caught in the gentle lull before evening. Office workers hustled past, briefcases swinging, lost in their own thoughts. School children on their way home skipped along the curb, calling out to one another in voices that carried the promise of the future. A breeze fluttered the American flag across the street, making its colors pulse bright and alive. Ellis took a break and sat quietly on the bench, the flower and note from earlier still by his side. He let his mind wander, remembering. He thought about Charlie, his friend, his brother in arms, no longer there beside him, but never far away. He pictured the faces of the teenagers who had challenged him, the moment they realized what legacy meant, and the way their eyes softened with understanding. He thought of the bus driver who saluted him, the city worker who shared his coffee, the little girl who'd smiled without pretense or prejudice. Each one a reminder that every day is a tapestry of small but powerful moments. Suddenly, the sound of sneakers scuffed against the sidewalk. A young boy, no older than 10, walked by, his backpack slung over one shoulder. He slowed as he reached the bench, glancing at Ellis. The boy paused, hesitating, as if unsure of the right words. Then, with a deep breath, he stepped forward and set a folded note and a wildflower down beside the first ones. "Thank you, sir," the boy said, meeting Ellis's eyes. "I'll remember." His voice was sincere, free of irony, and full of a gravity that felt older than his years. Ellis looked at the new note. Simple handwriting, a little uneven. It read, "My grandpa was a soldier, too. My mom says you keep the world clean. I hope I can be like you someday." The old man felt his throat tighten, emotion welling up inside him. He managed a smile, nodding his thanks. "You already are, son, just by stopping to care." The boy beamed and hurried away, his small form soon lost in the crowd. Ellis held the note gently, knowing that these small acts were the true markers of legacy, the proof that kindness echoes, sometimes quietly, but always meaningfully, through time. Across the street, a group of teens, different from the ones earlier, lounged by a storefront, watching Ellis. One of them, a girl with headphones and a skateboard, caught his eye and offered a respectful nod. She gestured to her friends, and together, they walked over, each placing a flower on the bench before moving on, wordless but intentional. A quiet voice, perhaps his own conscience, seemed to narrate. Respect isn't retro. It doesn't belong to the past. It's something you choose every day with every interaction, no matter who's watching. As the shadows lengthened, a few regulars from the neighborhood stopped by. An elderly woman set a pastry on the bench with a wink. A city cop, usually too hurried for conversation, paused his patrol to tip his hat. Even the pigeons seemed to approach with less fear, as if sensing that something sacred had taken root here. Ellis swept the last leaves from the curb, his movements slow and deliberate. He was tired now, not the exhaustion of battle, but the gentle fatigue that comes from a day spent doing the right thing. He gazed around, seeing not a rundown stop, but a place of quiet honor, a living reminder that service never truly ends. He thought again of all the people he'd known, comrades lost to war, friends scattered by the winds of time, strangers who'd become family through shared struggle. Their stories were woven into the fabric of this place, stitched into every act of kindness, every lesson passed down. As the light faded, the city seemed to lean in, listening. Ellis imagined what he'd say if he could address everyone, everywhere, all at once. He didn't clean for the job. He cleaned for the people, and maybe, just maybe, that's what real service looks like. A young mother walking by heard him mumble the words, and she smiled, repeating them to her daughter. That's right. We take care of each other. That's how the world gets better. Ellis sat down one last time, the bench creaking under his weight. He picked up the flowers and notes, tucking them carefully into his jacket. He wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, but he knew his purpose would be the same: to honor the past by serving the present, quietly and steadfastly. The flag fluttered in the dusk, brilliant against the deepening sky. The city glowed with the soft promise of twilight. A final bus pulled up, empty except for the driver, who paused and opened the door. Last run, old-timer. You coming? Ellis shook his head, a peaceful smile lighting his face. Not tonight. I'm already where I need to be. The driver saluted him before closing the doors and pulling away. The bus's taillights disappeared into the city's embrace, leaving Ellis alone but never lonely. As night fell, Ellis swept one final time, clearing the path not just of leaves and litter, but of all the harsh words and careless wounds left behind. His heart was full, his soul at peace, and in that quiet, sacred moment, beneath the waving flag and the city's glowing lights, he knew real service, real respect, real legacy, they never go out of style. They live on in every person willing to remember, to honor, and to care. So the story ends not with applause, but with a promise that every silent act of kindness, every gesture of respect, will ripple forward, making the world a little cleaner, a little brighter, a little more human. And maybe, just maybe, that's what true heroism is all about.